Hi, Charlie. This is your run review by Tom Sturgis from the 23rd of January. So, initial complaints being the tibial stress, and we've discussed general training workload, which I'll put in some notes. And so, we're looking at this review from the point of view that we're trying to improve your run economy, your run efficiency, that might reduce that running stress on the tibia and generally give you better speed and run mechanics. So we have your initial run on the left hand side. This is your first kind of run. So I'm just putting you into mid stance phase there. And then this is kind of what we were doing after some of the run drills and a quick review of what we were trying to achieve. So I've putting them both into what we call mid stance phase, and I'm going to lock them together. So hopefully they'll now move at the same time. We'll focus on your initial run then and what we're looking for. So just as mentioned before, looking at your left leg as it's coming through at this point here, this toe off and take off with the left foot, that we want to see immediate forward travel with the knee. And you can see that at the moment it just continues back and there is a knee bend, but even at this point there isn't really any forward travel of the knee. If we're just looking, kind of just swinging through here. And if we just then kind of glimpse over to the right hand side, again we're looking that there's much more active forward travel of the knee. And actually, as they're kind of synced, we can see that as they're both taking off, and if I just take a few more frames, you can see that the right-hand side, that the knees are already in line at this point, right, whereas the screen on the left, that leg is still trailing, the knee's still behind the hip, essentially dragging that weight from behind you as you're trying to move forward. But if we just take it another few frames forward, you can see just how much of a difference that makes now, where again, you're almost now about, this was at the same speed on the treadmill, you're just about to set up really just for landing, whereas the leg on the left hand side is swinging through. And that's these slower, longer strides, and then almost this leg having to play catch up. What we find here is that if we look back to the left screen, that because it's carrying more momentum, because it's having to now, because there's been initial delay on coming through on takeoff, that it has to swing through with more speed and to catch up. And then we have what we call this front kick or leg lock. So we're locking that left leg. And this is a couple of things. So it means that we're going to be landing a little bit further in front of the hip than we'd like. So landing position relative to hip. And I think mentioned before, but when people discuss what an overstride is, it's not anything to do with stride length, but the relationship between the knee and the ankle. And if we're loading in front of the knee, that would be considered an overstride. You do manage to recover, and the hamstrings are being used, and it does pull it back. Actually, let's just have a look at the other side. But we can see here there's that kind of full extension. And if I just move the lines out of the way, again, I would consider that as very close to an overstride there, and particularly just being quite far forward of the hip. So it's almost deceleration movement pattern the further forward. And we use the example as if you were just having to single leg hop yourself forwards, that there's no way that you'd be able to do that by landing in front of the hip, because you'd just stop yourself. Whereas you're trying to land as close under the hip as possible so you can get the body weight over the foot without putting on the brakes. If we have a look in this right hand screen, there's a much better example that we're really landing much closer under the hip in this position, but also that there isn't any further knee bend on landing. So the great running cue is that we're landing with the knee bent in the process of straightening. So just having a look on the left hand side with this left leg, because we're swinging through, we're landing with that straight leg, so that on landing we're having to bend that knee. The knee collapses essentially, which means longer ground contact time, and we lose a lot of that energy, that spring, and it's very knee joint quad dominant, where that's likely to fatigue in long distance. Whereas on the right hand side, we're taking the shorter, quicker strides, But you can see, because we're already having that immediate forward travel when the on takeoff, it's coming through in a much better position with more control. And even at this point now, it's much more of a piston rather than pendulum. And at this position, you're already now thinking about recovering that leg, driving it down under the hip, which means that you're now landing with the knee bent in the process of straightening. So foot is making contact now. There isn't any further knee bend. It's stable, and it then just gets that immediate push off. So this push off and pick up. The knees aren't looking to be high. I mentioned before, we want to keep it casual. So for the kind of long distance running that we're doing, we're just looking to lower the heels. So I mentioned before that we wouldn't really want the heels, that's a little bit low. We wouldn't want the heels to go any higher than the knee for the speed that we're doing. And sometimes they have a tendency to kick a little bit higher, although actually on the right hand side did kind of soften them. But you can see on your left hand screen, the heels definitely kick up very high, so that it's a very slow, long stride. But the heels definitely kick up high, and that's just a slight overuse of the hamstring. But again, it's something that will create some hamstring fatigue in some longer distance running. I'm just going to reset. Okay, another thing to note, and this tends to happen when we are taking these slower, longer strides, is that a slightly excessive upper torso rotation. So, and that's partly out of necessity, just for center of gravity. So if I'm kind of just putting that we have our kind of center here, because we're landing so far forward, we're having to excessively rotate just to kind of keep that balance. So again, coming through here, we can see that there's a big rotation now on this side. And actually, we're not really swinging from the shoulder joint where there's a forward and back swing of the arm from the shoulder. And actually that the arms are fixed in position and the shoulders are locked in position. And actually it looks like the arms are swinging, but it's really just the torso rotating. So if I just play that in slow motion, I might just speed that up to a quarter. So looking at the left screen, we can just see that the arms are very fixed. There's not much more of a front and back swing of the arm. And there's a lot of upper torso rotation where we can see a lot of movement of the shoulders rotating. We can also notice that just from the hand position. So the hands are very much going out away from the body, then they cross into the body. And I was saying, if you were going to do a forward jump, you would much more emphasis in that arm swing where you're throwing your arms forward and you want all the momentum and weight being carried forward. Or if you're jumping up onto the box, you'd swing the arms forward and up, not across the body, because it's just energy lost in the wrong direction. So that would be something to consider, although that's kind of slightly minor note, that we'd be looking to run square, keep the torso relatively square with minimal upper torso rotation and a little bit more emphasis on a slight swing of the arm from the shoulder forward and back. But that will naturally occur with the shorter, quicker strides. And actually, if we're looking at the right-hand side, there's still some rotation. I'll bring this back. Let's have a look on the right-hand side. Yeah, so definitely noticing some rotation, but there is an improvement. I think you're still finding your feet at that point. Let's just see further along. Overall stride, we were mentioning before, wasn't too bad. There was definitely one foot, looking at the way the foot presents itself to the floor. So just moments before the foot makes contact with the floor, the foot should be parallel to the floor. So as long as the ankle isn't too rigid as we swing through with this more pendulum effect, we shouldn't be presenting with the heel, should be parallel. So there is a slight heel strike and slap with the left foot. But the right foot, you can just see you've already got some good ankle control there, where there's actually not too much lift and it's fairly neutral and mid-foot stride, so there isn't too much heel contact there. but significantly better with that kind of foot being parallel, and you can definitely see him getting a really nice midfoot strike. Let's see, that's again, great frame there, that left foot, very parallel, doesn't really lift, and you're pulling that in. So again, actually that's a great stride there. With that frame, you can see again that by the time that you actually make contact and load with that left foot, the knees are in line. So yeah, much better alignment there. Whereas again, with this left foot on the left-hand side, you can see that right leg, that right knee is still trailing behind. Contact is a bit further forward. So we're just a very open hip. So I'm just going to play both together and let you just kind of have a look. We mentioned the kind of bobbing up and down effect. We call this vertical oscillation. And again, it's not necessarily that we're pushing up, but it's just where the knee has to bend and we get that drop. So typically something that you see quite often at the end of the London Marathon on the Mall, all the heads bopping up and down where they're so tired and they're just, the knees are collapsing even more. But we're looking to try and avoid that. So we're trying to stay tall, run tall, where there isn't any further knee bend on landing. And you were able to achieve that. So that playground skip that we were doing definitely helps. And just generally having that higher cadence where we're not having to overstride will definitely help as well. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Charlie.